Hello and welcome to BOT. Nidal, Lakshit, Suman, and Manthan meet here to talk about the bits of tech as it relates to digital transformation. Tune in and enjoy. Hello, everyone. We are back. The 11th time on the count. It used to always amaze me how when in a sport, let's say like cricket, somebody is on their 100th run, and how do they know that they are on their 100th run, right? Despite the dashboard not being visible. Now I understand, because even if you wake me up from in the middle of the night and ask me what hour of podcast are you recording, I know that it is the 11th one right now, and I think I'll know it every time, right? Because you're doing something that is too close to your heart, and that's why you are by default bound to remember it. Why am I saying this? Before we started this podcast, we did some bit of a research on a lot of things, right? From what the name should be, to what the format should be like, to what are we aiming to do, to why are we doing it, to whether it is even needed. I think that used to be a point of discussion for quite a while between the four of us, post which we reached to a consensus of starting it anyway, right? And today is the 11th hour of our journey of creating content, and more than that, actually sharing our experiences, right? And what we understand, not necessarily explaining the landscape, but just our understanding and experiences. How did we come about deciding the name of this podcast? How did we know that we want to do it on YouTube and not on certain other channels? How is it that we are still not on Reels of Instagram? All these things are a constant discussion and have also been a part of our discussions prior to starting this podcast. When we arrived at a decision of doing this, there was one thing that we inadvertently did, which was market research, right? Which is also the topic of what we're going to speak about today. Market research becomes very, very important from the point of view of starting anything new. It could be absolutely anything under the sun that you're starting. It could be a shop, it could be a blog post, it could be a podcast, or it could be a new online business, right? Market research becomes the underlying factor to most of these things. I could go open a shop directly and start selling pastries, only to find out that the weather is so hot that nobody wants to consume pastries in that area. The other way of doing it is by first taking the data to understand why is it that in a certain pin code there are no pastry shops, right? And how many pastry shops have opened and closed in the past, so on and so forth, right? This is what market research essentially means. What we are here to talk about today is not just market research and what it means, because there is plethora of content for it already, but what it means in terms of digital landscape, meaning what are the tools that are available out there for market research today? What are the technologies that empower these market research? What companies work for it? How is it that market research is a precursor to all businesses but is still not natively integrated into the digital tools? Is some of the thoughts that came to my mind when I started thinking about this topic, right? So one is the marketing concept, which is market research. The other is the digital aspect of it, from a tool and technology standpoint, and its integration with other Martech stack. That's where our focus is. What do you think?
Absolutely. Um, I've been watching Shark Tank a lot. I'm sure every one of us. And whenever we see that, we always see, hey, this product is not the right market fit, or questions like, what is the total addressable market? Give us the numbers. So mostly people do research before they actually launch the product, right? And it is amazing because the kind of market research can be done is always paid or unpaid. Unpaid is we all of us have access to it. So that's the first thing that came to my mind as Manthan was speaking. Um, Having said that, I did a research on what is actually the market research industry size. And as per Statistica, it's almost $84 billion US dollars in 2023. That is last year. So we can see, and As we know, number speaks for itself. Even if it is slightly skewed, that's fine. But we by the number we understand how huge this market is, and companies who are into surveys, it could be online survey, face-to-face surveys, phone surveys, secondary surveys like Nielsen. They've been there since a long time. My personal experience with market research started when I was in college, and in my first year of bachelor's in statistics, we were asked to make a questionnaire. Okay, we were given a product and told that, okay, this is your assignment in this practical session. Just list down the questionnaire. And I thought at that time that it's pretty simple, right? Let's say the product is a milk and you want to understand more about how is the key concept is obviously why are you researching it and the subsequent questions associated with it, and how would you utilize the information collected through that survey and do something for the brand, right? I thought it was simple, but it's not. Listing out a questionnaire is super difficult, and that's where the basis is probably 100 to 200 years ago. That's how the market research started as well. And that's when I had a huge respect of this industry. So these are my initial thoughts. There are a lot of online survey tools. I have used SurveyMonkey and Google Forms a lot while I was studying, and then it switched to Qualtrics, collecting data through Qualtrics while I was working, and then analyzing it in SPSS as a tool. And I would definitely speak more about it in some time.
Yeah, I was still muted when I was trying to speak. That's fantastic, Suman. I also think that in order to be able to tie these concepts back, right, as I was saying initially, it is important that the marketing concepts are tied back to the real tools. One gap that I continue to see is that market research in general happens to be a separate division in a company or a separate idea in a company which only a team is pursuing, and it is not directly integrated with the martech stack there is. Now, this is both for the right reason, and at times it could be fundamentally needed, right? Like how I know someone you were working on a company was trying to launch a new product, right? It was a data science project. So I'm just picking some ideas from that data science project for doing demand forecasting on a new product that is being launched, right? Now, for a project like this, if the data of past sales was there, which is great, right? That would be the basis of doing some demand forecasting along with some other parameters. But then market research becomes utmost important every time you're trying to launch a new product because that could factor in, and the factors could essentially end up being that just this month is a month alone is not good enough, right? Everything else is right, but this month alone is not good enough for us to do it. Only market research data might have that level of insight as opposed to the past sales data, etc., that a company might have in their CRM database, right? So it's not about collecting data or buying data from third party. Those things, in my understanding, are a given. What do you end up doing with that data, and how well it is integrated in your tool, such that when a marketing head is trying to run a campaign, um, that they by default bake the market research data into it, either for suppression criteria or for qualification criteria, right? These two could be the use cases through which you use market research data, meaning suppress all the people who belong to this area because this is what our market research said, right? This pin code is not going to consume pastries at all, as I was trying to say earlier. Suppressing that in itself could mean that you're targeting the right people, and that's where market research data could become very important. One reason why I think it is not natively integrated into most tools is because market research data has a low match rate because it is a third party data, has a low match rate with a first party data. You first party meaning company's own data, and third party meaning some other company gave you that data, right? There are companies whose business is just this, like demand base or inside view. There are so many companies out there who is just in the business of selling data, whom if I ask, hey, how many people bought a t-shirt in this city in last 5 years, they will be able to give me that data. How relevant is that data to my database, meaning the match rate? and then how relevant is it to the subsequent segment that I'm trying to create. This becomes a challenge, and this entire cycle of processing and cleansing the data is so huge that the effort may not be worth the outcome, is where most use cases die out in terms of market research and actual application of it today. That has been one of my many experiences.
Uh, Thanks, Vanthan. I mean, perfect. I mean, great analogy about the first party and the third party data. And I would like to actually pitch in on that particular piece of information, because what I was just about to, talk about. So generally, market research is done by some very large organizations, third party companies, because it requires a lot of resources and intensive exercises. It could be qualitative, quantitative, first party interviews. You may have to conduct, focus group discussions. You may have to reach out to folks. Sometimes there are paid studies being done with a set of peer group, where you do some control set versus a focus set, an experimental set, just to try and see some A/B testing experiments, just to see preferential treatments. Lot of beverages go through this ongoing practice where they have, folks testing different flavors just to see which flavor to launch in the market. uh, Pepsi does it a lot of times, for example. But there are few companies, and some really large organizations, let me tell you that, conglomerates would be the best word to use, that have their own internal marketing research teams. Now, why is that important? Well, the answer to that lies with the problem statement that you just mentioned, the match rate. In order to improve that match rate, because third party researchers will not always give you access to their first party data in order for you to match it. So if a very large conglomerate goes out into the market, puts up those POS stores where it simply says, hey, how did you like your experience in store? Did you find what you were looking for? Did you get what you were looking for? Where did you hear about us? How was your experience? Those two three basic questions, sometimes store relevant. You have helpers and researchers visiting their various dealers and stores and conducting first party interviews, so that they can expand their scope for first party data, they can expand their coverage, and to answer your question, can actually improve the matches by tying back that first party data with their data collected on site, so that they can personalize their experiences and localize their offerings to these folks. Now, this is about match rate, but why is this important to, tying it back to market research? Because the questions become relevant. The entire game of market research, AI, data science, forecasting, trending, it all begins with a question. The question, what's the customer's objective? What am I trying to do? Are my customers, how are my customers experiencing my product? Do I need to bring out new features into the market, to the product? How can I compete with my competitors? What is my competitive advantage? What is my USP? Am I keeping it, and can I improve upon it? These type of basic questions are what uh, you know drive these large scale market research organizations like Nielsen, Kantar. They provide services upon services yearly to go and audit and meet with their CXOs to conduct these discovery questions, so that they can frame hypothesis and prove or disprove those hypotheses during the market research stages. There are various uh, you know types of market research techniques, like I said, but typically, if I was to break it down, it could be quantitative and qualitative. Both are important. You'll be surprised on how many quantitative research have been, folks generally don't give a lot of importance to the qualitative research. Qualitative research is generally a user's own perception, text analysis, requires more effort than quantitative. Quantitative is more slightly easily collectible, because it's like a score from 1 to 10. But what most, because a research upon this research has actually come to the fore, and has given insight to the fact that qualitative research is in fact more reliable than quantitative, because people don't often give the scores that they feel. They generally would tend to give higher scores even if they're feeling unsatisfactory about a service or product. They're in a hurry, there are biases involved, and they're in a hurry to complete the form, in which case they will give inaccurate results. But if they take the time out to give a qualitative response, that is in fact more accurate, even if it's smaller, is more accurate than the quantitative ones.
Listen,
So
do you mind taking quick examples or giving quick examples on what
sure.
quantitative versus qualitative means in probably a real
Absolutely,
life thing?
absolutely. So
Yeah, yeah.
let's say, for example, you've gone into a store. You go to a retail store, a shoe store. Say for example, Adidas, for example. You've bought a shoe. You went there. You found a few shoes. Maybe tried on 5 6 shoes, but eventually ended up buying one pair of shoes. Then at the POS stage, they ask you. They have this screen these days where they ask you, hey, how was your in-store experience? They have few questions in there. One question being, how was the experience? Scale from 1 to 5. You would put maybe 3 or 4, something like that. Then they will ask you, did you find what you were looking for? The answer is yes. That's a qualitative input. That's a binary input. That's the sweet spot between quantitative and qualitative, because it's a binary input. Binary inputs in most statistical algorithms are quite factored importance, because they practically give you like a 50% weightage, 50% probability of everything. So they're very critical. And then they ask you, how was your experience, like a quick feedback for the seller. Almost 7 out of 10 folks will not write a comment on that. That's the unfortunate uh, real time scenario. But the 3 people who would write about the feedback is collected. The problem is processing that feedback, because if you go about, if it's a large store, even if you have thousands of people visiting that store on a daily basis, we were talking about 300 per daily, 330, that makes it almost 1,000 user feedbacks on a monthly basis. Can you actually read it on a daily or a monthly basis? The answer would most often be no. So how do you classify it? That's where tech comes in. That's where more data science approaches come in. You do text analysis, you bring out the sentiment score out of it, but they are more accurate because a person has taken the time out to bring those scores to you. Whereas when you do out the scores don't often tell the right story, because there have been so many, because the people would often put the scores while on a scale to 1 to 5. Most people wouldn't put 1 or 5. They would put something between 2 to 4, which does not give any sort of indicator to a data analyst. And I think someone might be able to pitch in here as well, and she'll tell you that the middle scores are the worst nightmare for a data scientist, because it's like, what sort of a score do I assign to them? What weightage do we assign to them? They're not classifiers, they're not binary inputs. You have to assign different weightages to them, and based on different weightages, they give different bias and prediction scores. So they're not as useful as a qualitative input is, even though it's lower in volume. That's the qualitative input of a user versus the quantitative input of a user, which good, necessary. But if it is better, as an advice, keep questions as objective as possible. uh, as a best practice for market research, we always, even when we conducted as part of our MBA, we tried keeping questions as objective as possible, as binary as possible, so that they can be easily classified, they can be easily clubbed into relevant cohorts, and maybe have one maximum two qualitative inputs, try and limit them to very few sentences as possible, uh, and try and capture user sentiments and not just general feedback.
Great inputs, Lakshit. I actually dealing with the exact problem that you stated just now, right? With the middle values when you send out a survey. We recently sent out NPS surveys to. So I'm working with a CPG organization that has global ticketing system where end users have to raise support tickets for certain types of issues. Now, what happens is that a lot of the times, you know how NPS score works, right? You all the neutral scores that will eventually downgrade your overall customer satisfaction score. However, you will not also get insights about why, right? Like you very rightly pointed out, all of these people who put those neutral scores, they don't share why. They don't share the additional statement about why did they do it. So what we have been considering doing, and this is just like from literally from this week, right? We have been considering adding a templated response that goes out whenever someone selects a neutral score, anything below a 9 or a 10. Can we get more insight? Please do include a reason why it is not a 9 or a 10, right? And just to get that insight. So that's a real problem statement. That being said, I want to also share a few other areas. We talked about some very interesting analogies about, first party versus third party data and how the match rate is different. The source is coming from a different, company altogether, which has a different set of objectives when they collected that data versus the custom objectives that a business has, right? Very interesting use cases. Those are from a point of view of like understanding the consumer more. Lakshit talked about addressing those specific questions. What is a consumer's preference? What is their feedback after using a product? One other sort of use case would be understanding, not from a consumer perspective, but macro trends in general, right? For example, media optimization. How does a company want to use media mix? What is the right, these days we know that digital is getting a lot more focus than traditional media, but it always also obviously depends on the industry. More and more shift focuses towards digital. We already talked about digital advertising in a different episode. But identifying that mix, for a certain industry, it probably makes sense to use a different media mix as compared to others. What is, the general trend? What are other companies in my industry doing, right? How do you get access to that information? It is via market research, and that's one of the reasons where you do not necessarily need to like match that with the data that you have. You are looking at that trend as, something like how you look at a dashboard and look at, can I try and test my media mix in accordance with what the industry research or the market research is telling me. Now that is obviously a gamble, but you are making a data driven decision, so there is always an inclination that it might work in your favor. So that's just one other use case where you as a company can rely on market research or research data that's available from external vendors, to optimize your media mix. And I've seen this happening, during my consulting gigs, working with large tech companies. This is something that they always do. They have, during their data analytics or their, let's say, um, their business review meetings, they have a section where they look at their own data, what they have collected, and an analysis and interpretation of those. And they also club it with a section where they are bringing in somebody from a third party agency or a market research partner who is sharing insights on, on a macro level. These are how, other players in the industry are doing. It could be competitive insights, it could be other data points that tell you like, this is another media channel where you should be investing into, because it is getting a lot of traction in the market, especially for your industry. And that's probably where you want to also maybe start putting some marketing dollars into, right? So that's just another interesting use case I wanted to share.
That's really great. So I have so many points in my mind that three of you have spoken, and I just don't know where to start. Uh, that one point which was common between Nidal and Lakshit is that when customers or clients put an average score like 3 from 1 to 5, then what do we actually do about it? And sometimes even if we make the comment section mandatory, as if, why is it 3? They may just put, let's say, a non-applicable and just leave that be, correct? Just a joke that came to my mind is that usually our bonus payout is normally distributed. So we are actually the 3, maybe not the low performers. None of us are. Probably not the high performers, but that's how the bonuses are paid out generally in a department. Okay, that aside, we've been speaking about um, how to utilize the market research data and actually do something with it, right? In terms of, let's say, if we're able to collect a good enriched first party data through Qualtrics. And as we were discussing this point, a point of view is something that popped up that I would like to quickly discuss, and let me know what your thoughts are, okay? Let's brainstorm this. Let's say that we have a first party data from Qualtrics. It can be fed into Adobe's AEP platform, which is Adobe Experience Platform, through an API. It is very much doable. Okay, so let's say it's a PepsiCo or a Colgate as a client, and they have their surveys done, and it's a decently enriched data. We ingest that data into Adobe AEP. Now, it's a survey data, so there's no point that we stream that data. We can obviously use batch as a mode. and store that data in the data lake. The way we utilize it over there, let's say using data science in AP, and build some regression based models, and then we have some insights from that Qualtrics data. And whenever, if there is a case in terms of the segments that has been built or audiences that have been built in AP, this batch data can very much be utilized and be sent for targeting. It could be for obviously for personalization purposes, right? This is what I think holistically, in an overarching way, could be very well done if the ecosystem at the client's place supports it, in terms of if they do have Adobe AEP or if they're willing to invest in that. It is very much doable. We might think it is not, but that's a use case that just came to my mind of probably how can we solve this in terms of utilizing market research data into something like personalization. So that was my point of view. The other thing that I wanted to also discuss is that I had way back, almost 5 years ago, for a large tech client, I had worked on their survey data. So the data was eventually collected in SPSS as a tool, and it is a widely known statistical analysis tool that is being used for survey-based data particularly. So we get that data. If we, whatever, we can do all the data cleaning. If we need to code some part of the data, we can definitely do that and actually get it in a particular format, and then do analysis. As I recall, the objective was to find purchase intent of customers for that tech brand through the survey that was taken. So we run two models. One was brand perception. So you can think, if I have to quote an example, let's just think of a quadrant. And in a quadrant, if I say brand like Apple, where would all of us put brand like Apple in that quadrant? Probably in a quadrant which has, let's say, expensive or cost as one of the parameter, right? Something like a brand like Samsung could be in a quadrant which is like, affordable, long lasting, like, a good battery life. So that was one section that was heavily worked upon through that survey data. The other part was a regression analysis wherein we did purchase intent and trying to find, using regression analysis, what are the purchase intent of people while purchasing a tech product, right? And it was amazing. The results were something that was absolutely unexpected. So these things are definitely done by companies, and they pay people to probably fill a 60 questionnaire, uh, so that they get some sort of relevant feedback about how their product is performing. Because if it's like a free survey, even if there are 5 questions, people may not be interested in actually investing their time, right? But in terms of paid surveys, especially for first party data, people definitely uh, give mostly 60 to 80% the right information of at least what they think. So these have been my understanding and experiences in market research.
So, like surveys are one thing, right? I think surveys are a very minuscule part of the entire landscape that market research is. Meaning, surveys is ideally um, only applicable to people who are in some way tied to that product, right? If I have never worn a blazer, I'm probably not the right fit to even do that survey. Or if I've never gone to a mall, what do I speak about that mall at all, right? Except for my own perception. So, like, there are multiple facets to this outside of a survey, which can be thought about. Survey is like a bottom up approach of getting to what is needed in terms of the market research data. But let's say I'm launching a new category, right? I'm launching a watch projector. Let me just take a random product. What sort of a data can I use for it such that it will be useful for me, right? As a company. Now, a watch projector has never been a thing. Do I use watch data? Do I use projector data? Do I use mobile data? Or do I use companies' data to make these decisions, right? This in itself, let's consider that there were only these four data sets available at disposal. These one question itself with these four data sets could take a lot of time to solve in a real life scenario, right? That's where market research comes in, wherein they already have data which is signals, meaning here are the people who are interested in tech. That is a good data point to begin with outside of these four data points, right? Or finding a common point from this to say that how many people of these are interested in tech, and now I want to show them these product. And then there are certain behavioral traits that I want to attach before I do this. That is what market research is meant to do. Except for the like, I'm considering that um, this is with an understanding that market research as a concept, as a marketing concept, is well understood, right? So I'm speaking it from a digital scenario, and not saying that product market fit is to be excluded, or the price point is to be excluded, or competitive analysis is not to be done. I'm assuming that all of that is done. Despite that, how would you go about actually executing a campaign around it is the bigger question. I think in a real life scenario, why these things fail is because the cycle is too huge. I cannot name a single tool which would tell me that, yes, I will take your market research data, despite all the CDPs being out there, right? Yes, I will take your market research data, match it with your first party, and I will give you the results by tomorrow. What companies want to do, if I have a watch projector ready, I want to bloody launch it tomorrow, right? Because I need to go now monetize my thing. In order to monetize, if I were to convince my investors that I need to buy this data to monetize this product, they'd be like, you know what, you've run out of money already, right? That's where the hustle is. Which brings me to my second point. There is one thing as data which comes out of market research, based on which we do market research, right? Both. There's other thing which is perception, and behavior. This, in a market research scenario, could be two different things, meaning a Venn diagram which does not have any overlap at all. Somebody on in a local shop could purchase the ice cream because that local shop there is very well known, and everybody wants to buy that ice cream when they get to that street. That is a behavioral data. There could be no digital tool out there which has this data at all, because there were no surveys that were ever floated, right? Or there was no digital footprint of that shop at all, right? Possibly they're not even listed on Google Maps, right? I'm sure there are very real life scenarios like this, where you end up asking only people who can send you to those places, except for, you know, going on websites out there. That's where market research essentially fails, and behavioral data takes precedence, right? I think this is one of the strong reasons why real life applications of market research data are less, because at the end of the day, when my watch projector starts selling, the point is to sell it, not to get my market research data right, not to ensure that my segments were activated or it were a part of CDP. All of this is just process. The outcome of all of this is that my product should sell. So the sell cycle becomes longer with this market research data at times, and that's why it's not given enough heed. That is what I'm trying to think.
Excellent questions, excellent perspective, Manthan. I tell you why, because now what I'm going to say might sound like a monologue and might stretch for a bit, because now I'm going to give some gyan that we learned in MBA schools with regards
Yeah.
to market research, and the one here might relate to it. There are many frameworks related to market research, and not all of those research, as you rightly pointed out, includes surveys or first party interviews conducted with the customers. uh, Market research scope, the scope of which is what we call as the scope. The question defines the scope of market research, and the scope of market research can go beyond just users and customers, can also include climate and environmental data as well. There are many frameworks to a market research. Taking your example, you mentioned about a watch projector. Now, even before doing a watch projector, while it's a good idea, the company first needs to understand whether it is even capable of creating a watch projector. It's an idea discussed in a boardroom setting. Can it be implemented? Which means it requires an inside out view of the capabilities of the company. So when you're talking about the capabilities of the company, the best way of researching is something called as a SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat. You try and identify A, what capabilities do you have? B, what trade-offs you would have to do. So of course, you have, as a company, you have limited resources and finite investments. If you were to create and while watch projector could be one priority project, there are other projects in the pipeline. Which project do you trade off with this one? Which is that a competitive advantage? Does it offer you more customers? What other OKRs of the company have been met with this particular project that may not be met with other projects? Opportunity. Opportunity sizing becomes a question in itself that has other frameworks, something like pestle frameworks, political, economical, social, technological, environmental, and legal compliances, in order to ensure, is this market fit right for my project? Suppose we have the capability of creating the watch projector. I can build it, I can create it, but is there a demand for it? No. So that demand supply analysis will drive the opportunity sizing for my watch projector. Threats. What are my competitors doing? Okay, even if we assume that watch projector in itself is a unique idea once in a lifetime, what are its alternatives? Will people be invested in buying in it? What if my entire market is all about analogous watches? People don't want smart watches. They're fed up of it. There are too many screens in the market. They don't want to add another screen to it. It's an analogous watches. So what is my USB? That sort of frameworks builds the capability. Now comes the outside in view of it, which is, so while I try and size the opportunity and the capability, is there a demand for it? The demand what's the market size for it? There are other frameworks for it, something called as NSOF matrix, meaning I have a certain line of products that I'm already promoting, and because now I'll have to promote this new product, which are my other products going to go down the pipeline? Like, there's a product life cycle matrix, there's a product maturity matrix, product maturity curves that are there that decide that at which point in my business should I pivot to a new product. Is it the right time for me to create this project? I may have the capability today, but is it the right time for me to invest in it? uh, Depending on the project maturity curves, which are my cash cows, which are my holy grails, which are the products that I need to dump in, which are the products that I may have to invest further in order to deepen my market presence, will decide whether or not I launch this watch projector, even though if I have the capability or not. The other market research, the other factors that would influence my decision would be could be something like a typical or four P matrices of marketing, the four P's of marketing: product, price, placement, and promotion. So I need to now involve my marketing team, ask them that, hey, if I was to come up with this project, how are you going to promote it? How are you going to price it? What is the market data that you have? Do you have the time? As Suman mentioned, do we have the time for it? Suppose this is our investment cost. What are our margins going to be? Do we keep the margin in the luxury end of products? Do I keep a margin as a mass product? Do I promote it as a niche product just for tech savvy folks? So what is my promotion strategy going to be? That will determine on how many features do I add in the watch project, in the watch projector. In Believe it or not, I've recently come across certain fitness bands that no longer even show what time. I mean, fitness bands, at least until certain points, used to show time is simply as just a secondary criteria, so that if you have something worn on your wrist, might as well be able to view the time on it. But they've even gotten rid of the time factor itself. They're simply saying put a band or a ring on your finger and just run with it. Will only give you your fitness data on your mobile phone, and you can view it on your screen. You don't need another screen on your wrist. So imagine the kind of boldness the marketing team would have had to come up with this, saying that we won't be replacing watches. We're not giving you another watch. We're giving you simply what you need, a fitness product. That's an example. And then comes other criteria. Once you've launched the product, how do we create its branding strategies? Branding strategies has a very, I mean, there are many research frameworks for branding as well. But typically, what drives the branding research are the three triangles, or are the three pillars of branding, as we call it: the ethos, pathos, and the logos of it. Ethos or pathos is the emotional connect that you have with the brand. So the question that you would be asking your research team is, how would this new product align with my synergy and my overall branded identity that have already resonated with the client? So for example, if you're Nike, your tagline is just do it, which means they want you to simply cut the clutter and get to the program fast. If you remember Nike's new engagements, they are more focus towards normal folks trying to achieve better instead of just athletes. It's an athlete product, but it is now also focusing towards just normal people who are beginning their journey towards fitness. In fact, very new advertisements have actually shown where they're taking plus size models and them running and sweating it out, breaking the clutter of only having supermodels or super athletes, fit athletes promoting the products. The other wing now the ethos of it. So what does the ethos mean is the trustworthiness and the credibility of it. uh, I So for example, if somebody, you said a watch projector, it's a good idea, great idea. But if I'm a clothing brand, if Zara was to come up with this tomorrow, do they have the credibility? I don't know. But if Apple comes up with similar product, they have already built a trust and credibility in the market that they are a tech company. They have created that uh, you know ethos with the customers, that they are a tech first company. They understand tech, and their tech would be foolproof, which means the product sells itself. There are market research done, and in order to gain that positioning in the customer's mind of ethos, then comes the logos, the logical side of things. Is this even needed? Are we like, will our brand be able to literally be able to serve certain customer, like the functional needs of the customer? There are always functional and aspirational needs when it comes to a brand. The aspirational needs are mostly taken care by your ethos and pathos of the brand, market research data. What are my, where do I stand? What's my positioning? There are many market research that create mind map of their customers in order to see the customer's positioning and the sentiments with this within their customer base. The logo side of it is more logical and more rational, where they try and see what's your USP, what's your differentiation, what are the features and products that you're serving and providing to the market, and is it solving a real world problem? While watch projector sounds like a good idea, but is it needed? And is it even okay? Even if it's a fun product or a tech savvy product, what real life problem will I be able to solve for it? Can I have, I don't know, but thinking hypothetically, replace a smartphone with it? Can I have, more of a Star Wars idea, when with a watch projector I can have hologram of a person talking to me, instead of trying to look at, in a smartphone? If that is the case, the sort of problems that we can solve it, then that is what we promote. Is that what people are looking for? Is that something that is in people's mind? If we can bring that synergy back into our product, then that becomes a selling strategy. Selling a product has practically two strategies: push or pull. The best branding, marketing, or selling strategies are the one that have a pull lever higher than their push. That push is more, push is not considered very tech savvy. Push is when you sort of have a less reliance on a market research. If your market research is good, you've created a product that's very well compliant with the market that you're serving, is very synergetic with the market that you're serving. If you well utilize your marketing research criteria, you can create a pull strategy for your product. And pull strategies for your brand and product will almost make your product self-sellable instead of having to invest more time in marketing. So invest more in research so that you have to invest less later during product promotions and cycles.
Great crash course on marketing, I would say, for anyone who's listening in. If you
I
haven't
got one
heard,
for sure.
if you haven't heard these terms before, I can say Lakshit
Reach
is
out to
not
Lakshit.
bluffing.
Yeah. Reach out to
Yeah,
Lakshit, not to us. We don't know anything about anything and everything that he said. It's only his book, not ours.
yeah. You should be a visiting marketing professor, Lakshit. Maybe you should consider that at some point in time.
Yeah.
That said, just wanted to add a couple
Hope
of.
you guys call me to one of the universities in Canada or Dubai. I'll consider it definitely.
We'll keep it in the books. So just one of the examples from Lakshit was about Nike, right? I was recently watching one of the movies called Air. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's about how Nike is trying to bring in Michael Jordan for the Air Jordan line of products, right? And how they were doing meticulous research and looking at strategies, because Nike had a very low market share in the US at that time. Converse was like one of the top sneaker brands, and then came Adidas, and then how Nike literally like toppled that entire market with signing Jordan. And there was, the movie was also about like research, looking at player stats, looking at insights there, and then taking calculated next steps. But that was a interesting one that just jumped at me. And then the other example that also reminded me about, failed product market fit is the Fire phone by Amazon. Amazon tried to enter the smartphone market in 2014. Show of hands for how many of you have heard about the Fire phone and the failed attempt. If you haven't, go check it out. And to anybody who's listening in, essentially, it had a lot of really cool features which were supposedly cool, but the market didn't care, right? So that's just another example you might want to check out. I'll end with a quick couple of thoughts about what's the latest trends in market research, especially what is the latest trend in anything and everything is AI. So I will not talk about AI. That's there everywhere, and we have talked about it enough and more in our previous episodes as well. One of the call outs Manthan mentioned earlier was you know if I want to launch my product tomorrow and I'm waiting for my market research data, that I cannot afford to waste any more time, right? And that's where real time market research is one of the trends that's rising, especially because you now, after a post COVID world, you have a lot of reliance on non-traditional market research methods. For example, not just the traditional surveys or focus groups and the amount of effort invested in going into in-person interviews and all of that. Instead, you can facilitate research tools online, right? You do not need to necessarily ask somebody a question, because like Lakshit mentioned earlier and some of us mentioned earlier, people do not fill in qualitative data. And the one thing to also remember, people say something but do something else altogether entirely, right? Which is where all of these behavioral analytics tools and real-time analytics tools, real-time customer experience tools give you insights about, in the subconscious, how somebody is, how someone's subconscious is letting them interact in a certain manner on a certain website, maybe due to different other reasons. And while at the same time they might fill in a user feedback form which says, I would generally always come back to this brand to buy a product, but that might not be what's actually happening, right? So all of that to say, there's several breakthroughs in this industry in how market research is administered, in how that data gets collected even real time and gets applied back, so that you are, you know you have quicker access to these insights. And yeah, that's helpful for your business eventually. So just wanted to share all of those.
Absolutely. So the one point that I have been thinking about since all of us have been discussing is disintegrated systems, which is a data problem in itself, irrespective whether the source of data is a market research data, right? My understanding is that most of the CPG companies that we have, uh, or retail companies, they do have market research being done either for the existing product or a new product that they want to launch. The fact is budget. Do they want to invest in an architecture which will enable them in future is the question, in my understanding. Obviously, if you're for a product that you are launching today, you might not want to invest in CDP right now because the priority is to sell that product. But you know that as a company, you would be launching new products in the future or probably upgrading features in the existing product. If you invest in an architecture that supports leveraging the market research data, which is collected in whichever form, online, offline, whatever that be, real time, and integrated into systems like CDP, and then push out the right information or personalization or whatever use case that you're trying to solve, it is very much doable because companies like PepsiCo are way ahead in their curve, like way ahead in terms of technology and architecture that they have. The issue is, again, disintegrated system, which might be the case with most of the companies, and that they want to invest or not. So these are my parting thoughts. For anybody who's out there and who think that it is worthy enough that if they do have an enriched data uh, captured through a market survey or market research, how do they want to utilize it? That is the question.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic thoughts. I just want to piggyback off Lakshit's thoughts previously, and you kind of did that, Suman, by saying that systems are disintegrated, and that's one of the core challenges. Um, another point of view on that is of everything that Lakshit mentioned, right? There are like 5 types of analysis that needs to be done, etc., etc. How many tools can we think of right now, right? Being in the core industry that would do that for us is the problem. Do we, let's say the four of us, do we have the ability to go create a tool like that? Absolutely yes, right? Um, but like, are there any tools like those right now which would do a SWOT analysis for a watch projector I'm launching? Hell no, I don't think there is one, right? I might have to go to like 5 sources, as I said, combine that data, hire a data scientist who would understand my business rules, and then convert that data into something. That is why these systems are disintegrated, in my opinion. So while the marketing book concepts are great, and it is very much outside of the purview of how much I understand, but from a tech standpoint, um, I know for a fact that there are not enough tools who would do even SWOT analysis, which is the bare minimum for anybody to do, right? There are tools which would claim to do it, but then when you go and understand the depth of it, it might only be enough, right? Now, with the advent of AI, what Nidal was trying to allude to, I guess, was this, that we it could become eventually possible, right? With enough data already powered, because market research is a horizontal concept. It's not a vertical concept, right? Meaning you need horizontal data to arrive at a vertical conclusion. That's where the irony of it is. Most other data set is vertical in nature, and then you just put a horizontal line on top of it, which is a segment, and then target, right? But market research starts at horizontal. That's where um, things kind of get challenging. And I think that is the next big reverse integration that will come into all these CDP technologies that are out there right now, or analytics tool, personalization tools that are out there right now. While we are forward integrating with everything, there is this reverse integration has kind of taken a backseat, and I think it will eventually improve, right? Where we have a portal which you open, do your SWOT analysis for the kind of product you're launching. The data is good enough in the backend that it is spitting out right facts for you, and using that fact, you go on about doing your personalization, optimization, etc., all your digital programs, right? That's where I see this going. And I think that kind of sums up everyone's sentiment here and what all of us were trying to get to. So this was fantastic. Let's do some more market research on what topics people would like to hear next, or what topics do we know more about in the first place, and go from there to the next episode.